Hey there, I'm Mr. Business Plan. Every day I crunch numbers and build presentations to explore potential investments across the globe. And this is you. You're disappointed, as your weekend schedule has been abruptly sabotaged by your parents. They tell you they want to visit your grandparents this weekend. While you do enjoy the treats and spare money, you really wanted to binge the new game you just bought. You weep, you cry, threaten to leave the house. However, your mom reminds you you're 16 and should act like it. You're eventually defeated and hesitantly enter the back of the car. You pout the entire way, but to no avail. Your visit to your grandma's was usual at first. She had baked your favorite cookies and filled your pockets with a lot of money. You were satisfied. However, something out of the ordinary happened during your visit. Your grandfather wanted to talk to you. You were almost certain you had never heard him speak. He said he had something important he wanted to share. "My dear grandson," he said, a tear running down his eye. He held a large burgundy-colored book. You had noticed the wall of these books before during your visits. Must have been old people's stuff, you thought. The cookies usually kept you very occupied. "This here is a collection I have accumulated in over 40 years. I recall spending time together with my father in building this collection." What in the world could he be talking about? Your mind came up with the most random ideas for potential collections. You received the book. Open the first page to find yourself confused. Stamps? This one has a president on it, and this one has a small flower. Dated 1987. Cool, I guess. I don't know. Each of them had a number on them, signifying their face value. You didn't really understand the significance of these pieces of paper. You had seen stamps on mail prior, perhaps, but you hadn't seen someone so keen on collecting them. While it signified nothing to you emotionally, it clearly carried great weight for your grandfather. You hesitantly agreed to take it. Well, basically your mom forced you to. You did skim through it a bit, eventually noticing there were stamps from different countries in the collection as well. Some of them seemed to have been stuck on some kind of yellow paper. These stamps were used. People would use to cut the stamps from envelopes. They're basically artifacts, your mother enlightened you. All you could think of was the potential of these being worth a fortune. 40 years of stamp collecting. Surely it was worth a lot. You started thinking about selling the collection, you evil, evil child. The first week you forgot about the burgundy book. It was sitting in the living room library. Next week you took it to the only adult you knew. Me, Mr. Business Plan. After all, Mr. Business Plan knows he has to spend money to make money. Surely I would pay something for this. Plus, I am literally made of money. However, your dreams of a fortune were quickly shattered when I told you these stamps carried basically no economic value. But I did ask you to sit down, as I was worried you wouldn't stop trying to sell this collection. Like many of the same generation, you inherited something very valuable. It's only valuable to you and your family, as most of these stamps are quite common. They're printed in the millions. Most of them are probably mint condition still after all these years. But here's the interesting part. Whoever gave you that collection collected those stamps for a reason. There was purpose in it. There was a time and place where that person thought this should be in a collection. It should be in a burgundy book somewhere. It was a calculated mix of emotions. It's very likely that the person who made this collection discarded some stamps, added some others, changed the mix just so it fits their own personal preferences on how this collection should be. It was part of the collector's life. It carried history with it. You could potentially learn things about your grandfather you wouldn't have learned otherwise. Things he couldn't say. Humans have this tendency to collect things. Postage stamps were not the first, nor were they the last collectible trend in the world. Before postage stamps, people collected seashells, paintings, rocks, and many other things. Nowadays, there are companies that specifically create collector's items. And these collections are sold for crazy prices online. It's insane. Now, all collectibles have certain things they have in common. Number one is the aesthetic value of the item that is being collected. It is presentable and impressive to the person who is looking to collect it, and that gives the person more motivation to collect them. Paintings, seashells, postage stamps, these are things that carry aesthetic values. Number two is the scarcity of an item. There is a greater fear of missing out if there is a limited supply of a collectible. There will only be a limited number of paintings an artist can paint during their lifetime. There is only a limited amount of each Lego set being produced. Number three is the ease of accessibility. Are you able to quickly acquire the product you're looking for? Do you see it in stores? What steps do you need to take to be able to get one of these products? If a limited edition product is only available in a certain event or a certain location, then it's very likely that it's not going to be a mainstream collectible. And number four is the legitimacy of the product. When I say legitimacy, I'm referring to trust and reliability of the issuer of the product. Let's say an issuer is referring to a product as limited edition. Buyers need to have certainty that the issuer will keep the promise and not overflood the market. Now, when you take all of these into consideration, it isn't really a surprise that postage stamps became what they are, prime collectibles. They're pleasing to look at, well, most of them at least. There's a limited supply of each stamp being produced, though most of them are printed in the millions. And accessibility was at its peak because stamps literally come to your door. It can't be more accessible than that. And a very significant portion of stamps are printed by organizations funded by governments. It's essentially a government-managed collection set. Stamp collecting still holds up as one of the largest collectible trends in the world, and this is despite its decreasing popularity. Its accessibility in the day-to-day life of people made it so popular. It was necessary to send postage. In addition, they're lightweight, they're easy to store, and they are very cheap to collect. You like the style of a stamp. You're worried that the next time you go to the post office, you're not going to be able to find it. Well, might as well buy some now. I'll keep it in a small booklet, right? Well, now you're a collector. It's a collector's edition item. There is always a stamp suitable for your personal taste as well. They have popular cartoon characters, they have local flowers, they have animals, they have government figures on them, if that's what you're interested in, and many more things. Due to inflation, the economic value on the face of a stamp will decrease over time, but you don't care. You just spend a few bucks on it. You're either gonna stamp it on a mail item, or you're gonna keep it in a small bag. You don't really care about the inherent value. And this kind of attitude is how a collectibles trend slowly kicks off. It's the foundation of its sustainability. The collectible item creates a small or niche market that is passionate about it. Prices are likely affordable, or at least justifiable at this point. If we look at the history of stamp collection, it starts all the way in the 18th century. And the first known collector is likely the man named John Edward Gray. He was a zoologist. The interest in stamp collecting was a common trend, with the Royal Philatelic Society in London being formed in the 18th century. Stamp collection is not only about sending postage, it's also a way to send clear visual messages in a region. Countries that invade another firstly legitimize their rule through the stamps. This was quite common during World War II. It's not only the case that you legitimize the rule of a leader through stamps, you can also challenge it. During the same time period, the US worked on an operation called Operation Cornflakes, where they dropped 96,000 letters with propaganda into Axis territory. However, the operation didn't really go as intended, as most of the letters never really received the recipient. The postage stamp trend really grew during the 1950s to the 1970s with more than tens of millions of active stamp collectors. It was deemed the world's greatest hobby by many. A lot of famous people collected stamps as well, from comedians to famous politicians to kings. Prices for stamps increased, especially the older issues that are no longer being produced. Now, it wasn't the case that only collectors were looking to enter the market. Now you had these so-called investors, who are looking to make a quick buck from the market. Now, this period of collectibles is when you see real increase in both demand and prices. At that point, it feels like this growth will continue forever. In hindsight, it may be clear that this growth was going to stop eventually, but at that moment, that's not what you're thinking. Everyone is in the market. You have this incredible fear of missing out. But nothing in life can stand the test of time forever. If there is possibility to make money, people will find a way to make money. An American entrepreneur called Finbar B. Kenny made a deal with the Trucial States. The Trucial States were a group of tribal confederations that existed in the current territory of the United Arab Emirates. Finbar would print stamps on their behalf for sale to international collectors. The topics of these stamps would be ridiculously diversified, from cars to animals to space programs. There were barely any people living in the Trucial State at that time. All of these stamps being printed, they were for collectors' purposes only. These stamps never saw the post offices. They went directly to Europe, they went directly to the USA. They never saw the light of day. They would likely hiss and shout if they saw a mailman. These stamps were called dune stamps, but they were not the only culprits catering to collectors. Cancel to order stamps were developed that were marked by post offices as cancelled. So this basically meant they would never be used in sending postage. It was impossible. They had no inherent value. These stamps were used as handouts to collectors. And then lastly, we have illegal stamps. Legal stamps are directly produced by legal facilities that do not have the right to issue stamps in the select country. Now, all of these combined oversupplied the market for collectors. Demand eventually failed to catch up to this new market supply. Dealers unloaded their stamps, and soon a market crash followed. The final killing blow to stamps was the introduction of email, which pushed the overall demand even further down. Nowadays, most postage stamps have failed to carry over their value, and the number of collectors continue to decrease over time, as new generations do not carry the same stamp collecting habit as their forefathers. You will find countless inherited collections being dumped online by the next generation, pushing the supply even further up. Now, all of these may seem incredibly depressing towards stamp collection. Dealers and auctioneers made their money, while people who were interested in this hobby lost a lot of money. But now, you're in the collector's market. You don't have to worry about the price of the product you're purchasing. You can fill an entire book with postage stamps now. Why not try it out? Maybe there is some level of satisfaction you could receive from collecting stamps. You listened carefully to my words, but you didn't really seem like you were convinced on what I had to say. Disappointed, you left my office and returned to your home. You left it somewhere in the house, not to be found again for another 10 or so years. You left for college. You got a job at a call center. You even had a girlfriend at some point. Life's alright. I mean, things could always get better. You return to your childhood house to visit your parents and end up finding the burgundy book you had hid so long ago. You sit down and open the book. Each page carries something different. You feel like you understand it better now. At the final page, to your surprise, you find a photo. A photo of your grandparents, from their youth, together. They look really happy. Perfectly preserved along the postage stamps. At the back stands a date, more than 50 years ago. You found a new appreciation to this book, and spend the rest of the evening looking at the stamps. You feel the presence of your grandfather sitting next to you, telling the stories of each stamp and how he collected it. You appreciate these moments. After all those years, you began your own collection. You take a bit more effort than your grandfather did in taking notes about each collection. No one around you understands your hobby, but that's okay. You like it, and that's all that matters. Aren't you happy you listened to me, Mr. Business Plan? I truly am a man of great knowledge. It's a shame I was arrested for tax fraud. Thank you for sticking around for my talk about stamps and other things. Please let me know what you think. Consider subscribing and I'll see you in the next video.